Welcome to Michael Minute, conversations about collaboration brought to you by the capacity creators at MyCo Consulting LLC, where we help higher ed, nonprofit, and philanthropic leaders advance the initiatives they care about most.
I'm your host, Deb Mashek, and I'm talking today with Michael Nanfito, founder of Nanfito Associates and the past executive director of the National Institute for Technology and Liberal Education. Michael is also an artist and a boat builder. Michael, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
You know, it's interesting. So I'm doing all of this collaboration consulting now, as you know, and I really think, you're my origin story. You're the one who, back in the day at the Claremont colleges, when I was working to try to think through how to help the institutions work better together, that you were the consultant on that project and really shared so much and really inspired this passion for it. So thank you.
No, it's been a very interesting journey for me, and I'm sure it has been even more so for you, making all these changes and emerging in this fashion.
Emerge. So my first question for you is a broad one.
Okay.
What do you know to be true about collaboration?
Off the cuff?
Right, just off the cuff. The three big points are no.
It is difficult. And that difficulty is underestimated by almost everybody who first starts trying to collaborate. That's the very first thing that comes to my mind. Collaboration, real collaboration is very difficult.
So first, I guess we should talk about what is real collaboration. And then I want to ask what makes it so difficult. So what is collaboration?
Well, I think as you and I have talked since 2015, there are several elements to collaboration and distinguished from things like simple networking, slightly less simple cooperating, evolving into coordinating. The biggest things I think that distinguish collaboration from some of those other practices are the importance of sharing things like risk and responsibility, sharing risk and responsibility, not delegating risk, actually embracing the risks and responsibilities and rewards with and of the other collaborators, that you actually enmeshed with those in a new organizational way.
And so what you're talking about here is this idea that the word collaboration, it's thrown about to basically represent any way that people work together. Let's call it that we're collaborating. And what you're pushing back on is that idea that not all ways of working together are created equal. They're not the same thing, that they involve different sorts of processes. I'm wondering if you can give us an example of what is different, the networking thing and that coordinating and that collaborating thing. Can you kind of paint a picture?
Well, so networking, simple networking, the main attribute, and perhaps the only attribute, is sharing of information back and forth. I know someone who does some work that you might be interested in. I give you their name and contact info. We're networking. Boom. And it's incredibly valuable. And which is an important point. None of these nodes are any more valuable than the other. They all are very important tools to be aware of and to use, as long as we recognize and identify and communicate the distinctions between simple networking, where we're just sharing information, cooperating, where we agree to work together temporarily on something, perhaps for a week or two or a day or an hour, whatever it may be. We're going to agree to cooperate. Very little sharing of resources in that, if any, frankly. We tend to be two separate agents working towards maybe some goal that might be related, but we're working separately usually.
It's like parallel playing kids.
Exactly, and there's immense value in that. And one of the things about some of these other nodes, it's almost like they can be, in a wise project manager who's understanding these things are happening, understanding what are the values of some of those other nodes and modalities is sort of an experimental laboratory phase where you get to learn something about these other groups or individuals, or how you might identify talent amongst those groups. As you move towards, if it's reasonable and valuable to move towards real collaboration, identifying the roster of talent is really, really important. Who's going to do what and why?
And
Coordinating.
I think, just to interrupt for a second, I think that idea of these different ways of working together is representing different tools that are more or less valuable within different contexts is really important. And then I'm also just picturing one of the images in our people, tools, and processes guide, where there's this climb, this escalation. It doesn't intend to communicate that, oh, collaboration is the end all be all, that it should be the end state or the shared goal necessarily, but that there is this elevation of that risk sharing, the reward sharing, that feels really important here.
I think it's hugely important. And one of the stories that I've told from an individual at a certain university who was very open and honest about, in their view, collaborating. For example, they were trying to work with a university in Brazil. For them, collaborating was getting them to do what they wanted them to do, which is kind of cooperating, sort of.
Kind of compelling someone to do something.
Really, because the reality is, okay, it's an influential university here in the States. They've got some prestige. So is to this other university's advantage to be associated with this university. And that gets to something I've thought about a lot, is sort of the transactional nature of some things that masquerade as collaboration.
Yeah,
really, it's transactional. We're both getting something out of this. And so we're labeling it collaboration. And not so long ago, especially in higher ed, the label collaboration became hugely important, because for a time there was millions of dollars of grant money being thrown around if you would collaborate.
Well, I gotta say, so I have Google alerts set up for various keywords relevant to Michael Consulting. One of those is the keyword of collaboration. Oh my goodness, the number of hits every single day on that theme. And so entertainment over coffee is I'll scan through those. And of course, they're using that word collaboration in quite a wide range of ways. The idea of the transactional thing, is you were talking, so my background is, as you know, as a close relationships researcher. And there's this idea in the close relationships researcher of communal versus exchange relationships. Yeah. And that in an exchange relationship, what we do is we're tracking each other's inputs and outputs pretty consistently. So if I made dinner last night, I know if you made dinner the night before or not, and it's a tit for tat sort of arrangement.
Right.
Not the foundation of a healthy romantic relationship or friendship. Instead, you want more of what's called a communal relationship, where there's a sincere belief that over the long haul, we're gonna be taking care of each other. We're gonna get taken care of. I'm not tracking inputs and outputs. Instead, what I'm looking to do is elevating your needs as equally important as my own.
Right, and that I think zooms ahead to a big part of what collaboration really is about. Where, exactly as you just said, I understand. I have internalized the value that your success will be my success, and it's that communal relationship that. And that takes a lot of work to get there. And that kind of gets to the second part of your question, what makes it hard?
Right.
And so many things make it hard. But that kind of gets to something that I've thought a lot about, and I've witnessed over and over and over again. In real life, if some mythical project A gets a lot of traction and gets to the level of we're actually starting to coordinate, to create a collaboration down the road. Real live people are involved in doing that with real live work and professional identities.
Well,
doing what they've been doing.
And real life abilities, real life insecurities, real life pressures, juggling all those other things on that list. And the idea that sometimes these collaborations are this add-on, like, oh, in addition to everything else you're doing, add this. And that's a recipe for not great.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've called in the past bolt-on projects. You're doing this, let's bolt this on too.
Like a
And
Frankenstein.
yeah, that's a good point. It's mission creep on that level. It's like, and so one of the things that happens internally, even internally to the persons, many times, is this: it can be viewed as a threat to my professional identity. This is what I do. This is what I think I'm good at. And now you want me to do something different. Even if I don't articulate that completely consciously, that's happening for some people sometimes internally. And that can have all kinds of interesting ramifications.
Including, I think, sometimes positive ones, because it's like, wow, now I'm taking on these new identities, these new capacities, and there's almost a expansion of self available through that. But if it feels like a threat to identity or a loss of identity, that can feel really scary, I think.
I think so. And I think it does fall on, and we've talked about this, at some point there needs to be somebody who's in an operational management mode where they report to champions and sponsors and other executive directors, whatever that happens to be. They're the lens through which a lot of information is communicated. That individual has to be aware of all these things. That's why that idea of cultivating talent and really having your ear to the ground on who's doing what, who's feeling what.
I've heard you say a number of times that, I even wrote it down, people will solve for the problem they see. And that this is one of the challenges of interinstitutional collaboration. What do you mean by that? I'm wondering if you can unpack that a bit.
There's a couple layers to this, so let me tease this out a little bit. First of all, I think that's hugely related to the idea of having a very specific statement of shared purpose or problem statement, where what we are trying to accomplish in this group effort is completely understood and embraced by the players. And it's easy to say that, well, I've drafted this document and it's crystal clear to me because I wrote it. But if it's not crystal clear to the other players, and usually if we've gone to the point of being in a collaboration, it's a fairly complex affair. If we're collaborating, there are lots of moving parts. So if I have not done a really excellent job of communicating what that objective is and what the attributes are, if I haven't done that, then all of my talent are going to show up. If they've had any kind of involvement at all with any of the attributes of this project, they're going to bring that past to that table. And if I've done a poor job of articulating what the objective is, they're going to start working on what they see to be the objective. And that's on me as the project manager.
Well, I was going to say you're using the I word a lot there. And I was going to ask, what is that role that you imagine yourself sitting in, where you're bringing these others to the table? And it's the project manager role.
Yeah, and people and different labels might apply. In my experience, it's typically been identified as a project manager. We can come up with all sorts of other potential labels and phrases, but to me that kind of works.
Yeah. And so, this thing that we're writing together, this statement of shared purpose, problem statement, if you were to, let's just brainstorm a little. What would we say are the 5 most important tips or something to write an effective statement of shared purpose?
I would strive to be pithy. This is not the time to write a novel. It has to be something that's easily accessible relatively quickly. And if something is so complex that it requires 20 pages to write, I've already failed. That should be carved up into 20 different phases.
Yeah, it'd be like start with the small thing. I usually think about them as like a 2 to 3 page document.
Yeah, even 3 pages, I think for some people is pushing it. Because it has to be something that I can get right away. I think that's really important. It has to also be something that whatever the objectives delineated are, have to be things that we have already done some pre-work on, and we agree, everybody around this table, we can all agree that these are things that we have to work on. If we don't all agree, then already we've got a bit of a problem. Now there's an opportunity in that too. As you said, there are some positive aspects to some of these shaky issues as well. Because in that process of talking, we can start to learn, I can start to learn about maybe the breadth of this is a little more than I thought, and it affects my thinking, how I can approach this. So it becomes there's an interplay involved too. But I think that in my experience, if we don't all agree that these 3 or 4 or 5 things are the objectives that we're going to work on in whatever format, whatever modality, if we don't agree, I've got a problem already. The idea of incentive from Noster is in trouble. One of the add-ons to the Noster model is buy-in. If I don't agree with you, you've diminished my ability to buy into what you want me to do, because we just don't agree. And if I'm a significant player, then you as project manager, you have a bit of a challenge. So
yeah, and for listeners who maybe haven't encountered Noster before, I'll be sure to put it in a link to it in the show notes, as they say. But this idea of, if you don't have incentives or buy-in, that people will not necessarily with intention, but perhaps inadvertently sabotage the project from the get-go, and so you're not actually going to be able to reach those collaborative goals.
Right, and it's usually unconscious. Although I have witnessed conscious efforts. It does happen. I don't think it, especially in our world, I don't think that happens that much. But it does. The sabotage can be just merely dragging my feet,
Yeah. Well, right. I mean, if you're a busy higher ed or nonprofit leader juggling a million things, and there's this collaboration that you're not quite sure why the heck we're doing it in the first place, and you have to decide at the end of the day which of these 10 to-dos are you actually going to knock out before heading home for dinner, and you can't remember why this thing is important, then of course you're not going to do it. So I would,
right. I think that's huge. Okay.
Oh, sorry, I think we had a hiccup in the audio. Go ahead.
Yeah, we burped for a second there. I think that's huge. And again, it goes to the idea of I'm bolting things on. Here I have a full-time job already, and now somebody has layered these other tasks onto me, and I'm already fairly stressed. So it isn't just buy-in. So in addition to that, the statement of shared purpose should communicate some excitement, some enthusiasm, because it shares a vision for something that is possible that we're not doing now. And that's a big part of this, as we've written. Collaboration is an attempt to do something that I can't do by myself, but I value having been done.
Yeah.
And that's where there's that opportunity. One of the things that I think is statement of shared purpose, it must communicate enthusiasm, and in a way that it, at best, it becomes infectious. You excite the folks. So they're not just, because I've written elsewhere, mention collaboration to people, to staff, and their eyes glaze over immediately. Here we go again.
Right. It's probably on par with strategic planning in a lot of institutions. Like, oh, great, let's do another cycle of that.
Right. So that gets to another thing about a problem statement of purpose, which are not quite the same, but they share a lot of elements. Communicate very effectively how and why the outcomes will make us better at whatever it is we're up to, but also individually. My professional life, my organizational life, my collegial life has an opportunity to be even better than it already is. I get to learn new things, that sort of thing.
I think that is so important, because I think sometimes when people talk about collaboration, there's this assumption that it should only be for the greater good. Like, the only reason to do this is because it's good for everybody. But it's fine to have personal motivation, whether it's for your institution or your organization. In fact, I would say if you don't have that, then it's going to wither on the vine.
I think that's exactly right. I guess to contextualize that, in real life, when real people are brought into a room and it's communicated, we're going to collaborate on X, they're bringing a whole bunch of experiences with history, sometimes with things, maybe even most of the time, things that didn't go quite as planned. So many collaborations wither on the vine, which is why we've done the work we've done. to a lot of this. It's not to say you should do X. It's to help folks see the value of what real collaboration looks like, so that they can apply it when appropriate, but also give them some specific tools and awarenesses that they may not have completely articulated to themselves when managing their staff, when working with other organizations. And this crosses all industries, all modes. This is about how people either work together or don't work together. This is a people thing. It's a human thing.
It's such a person thing. Yeah. And this idea of making salient the work that will be involved, to set expectations and to get ready to justify to oneself and to one's organization why we're going to do the hard work of collaborating. Right. So back to the statement of shared purpose, I think two other things are on my mind about what makes it really strong. One is that they're co-authored. So it's not that, one person on high like drops it as like, this is what you shall do, dear collaborators, but that the stakeholders at the table are working together. And the second one that comes to mind is the importance of actually adopting it as a formal gesture. So whether it's, here's our final draft, can we vote on it? Is this what we're adopting? Because I think that starts to protect against, there's always going to be a mission creep. There's always going to be personnel changeover, but having a formal statement that's adopted can serve as this touchstone that we can keep returning to, like, oh yeah, that's what we're trying to do. This is the reason why.
That's exactly right. I think we might have touched on that in the paper, the idea of having these touchstone tools and documents to refer back to, because as you know, in the heat of battle, we forget and new possibilities come up. And one of to touch on that a little bit, because this resource becomes adopted, I think it also opens the way to culturally understanding that we are going to be generating things like this, objects like this, because related to the statement of shared purpose sometimes is another tool, something like a memorandum of understanding, which takes it a little further and should lay out some specifics: who's involved, what they will do, when they can do it, when this ends, a start and a finish. So to enable all of us to plan effectively for both of our organizations, because if we enter into these collaborations, as we've said, we're layering work onto usually somebody. And that also opens the door. Sometimes a collaboration can be quite long-standing, and sometimes people's jobs need to be redefined to allow, because it ends up not being a little thing I'm layering onto you. I've actually changed what you do every day.
Right.
And that goes back to, I think, the really important thing you said about co-authoring these resources, because otherwise it just feels authoritarian.
So here's another question for you. So you are the one person in my entire life I know who has built a boat.
Yes.
And this is one of your many fascinating, deep, passionate hobbies. What do we know about collaboration from the vantage point of boat building?
So, boy, how much time do you have? It's not always obvious, even on a small boat. Boats are aggregates of systems, and if it's a big enough boat, you've got a team of people with different skills coming together, from design to we're hoisting sails. I mean, there's different skills involved. And usually in that world, people are pretty passionate both about what they do and how they do it. Mm-hmm. They become very invested in a certain series of processes and tools.
I was wondering about those three, yeah.
So, on a project like that, there's going to be somebody who's in charge, and you're in charge of a bunch of people, men and women, who are all very, very skilled, frequently very opinionated, because there's more than one way to plank a boat. And again, there are so many, and the whole, people, tools, and processes, it originally came from my desire to try to explain what I thought were the rudiments of boat building, and I came up with materials, tools, and processes.
Mhm.
Really understand the materials that you're going to be using for any given project. Really know what the attributes are of those resources. Really understand how to use tools to manipulate those attributes in a certain way. And really understand the processes needed to set up those tools to be effective and achieve an economy of motion to create something from a piece of paper to a very graceful three-dimensional object which moves through the media of air and water, hopefully gracefully. So there's so many people involved in that, all with a variety of skills, and usually working on multiple projects at the same time. You don't work on a boat unless you're a small boat builder. You work on multiple boats.
Mhm.
You got several things going, so you've got to juggle all those things. You've got to juggle all those attributes that we've talked about. Understanding where is it simple networking, where am I just cooperating, where is it turning a true full-blown collaboration. We're building a 35-foot mini schooner. There is so much involved, from acquiring the appropriate materials to the metalwork that's involved, the rigging that's involved, the planking, the scarfing. I mean, there's just so much involved in making this thing happen.
So what strikes me too, and I'm going to put this out there and you tell me if this is a wrong intuition, is that whether it's with boat building or with collaboration, that there's something mutually constraining about people, tools, and processes. That if you have junk materials, what you can do with those materials is necessarily limited. Likewise, if you have amazing materials, but the people are not particularly skilled, the materials themselves are not going to make the boat. What is your reaction to that intuition?
That is beautiful intuition. I can tell you, I've worked on boats that are comprised of beautiful material, but if you don't have the right team, if they don't have the right skills, then things aren't going to be done as well as they could be. Conversely, I've built small boats out of marine plywood, but they are incredibly beautiful and they move through the water. The design was a good design. Hopefully my execution of the design was well. I do strive to make them beautiful as well. But you can take, that's really important for collaboration, interorganizational collaboration, because very few organizations are going to give a collaboration like that an unlimited budget. You've got what you've got.
Unfortunately, no, just joking.
You've got X amount of time, and you've got X amount of money, and you have X amount of people, and those frequently change, and usually they go down. So I think it's a really wonderful observation. You can do something really well if you have all the right tools and you've developed really good processes. You can work with your people to do really wonderful things. But conversely, we've talked about this too, you can have too much money.
Mm-hmm. Constraints are a great thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we just throw money at it and expect that, well, because I spent $2 million on this project, not 500,000. It's going to be somehow better. But again, if the sponsors and champions are behind what's happening and they work with the manager on the ground to develop an effective collaborative team, you can, and I made a career of this, you can do, to be the cliche, you can do more with less.
Yeah.
And I used to routinely promise, I will get you more than you had before if I've got the right team. And if you let me build the team.
I love that. Using
these principles of really trying to commit to the individuals on the team. And that's what makes it so personally challenging, I think, to be a really, in my opinion, a really effective project manager. You have to be really good at so many things, just, skills, but also bordering on empathic.
Well, and I think one of the things that I feel very strongly about on this, you have to be good at a lot of things. We're also not trained on how to be good collaborators, that there's, it's kind of like old school teaching models where it was sink or swim. Either you were good at it or you weren't. But the idea that there are professional development opportunities, that there are ways that you could become better at this still feels pretty new to people. And it's hard. Going back to what the segment we started with, it's hard work to do this collaboration.
It is very hard. And it is really hard. And I think that's why we're doing what we're doing, to try to help people minimize the difficulty for themselves. It'll never be easy, because you get two people in the room, you have three different opinions. I mean, that's just human nature. And so if we accept that, and then start to use some tools that I think embrace the realities of how real people operate with other people, and not be judgmental about it. Just understand, well, this is how people are, and it's part of my job is to herd these cats to turn into puppies who like to work together, at least temporarily.
Yeah, I think that's a great one to end on. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.